Hi class. Wanted to quickly as I can kind of break down this paper that a student wrote for me about 2 years ago. Her name was Maritza, and she was actually in my English 1A95 class. She worked as an academic coach in that class. She took my 1B, and I think she just graduated with her bachelor's from Stanislaus, and I think she's going to start a UOP. But anyway, I don't have a lot of time to do this, but I kind of want to go as quickly as I can and try to touch on some of the important parts. So the first thing you'll notice is the title, right? That's that title that I mentioned in the last video. On the left-hand side, you got the creative, Liberating Mango, and on the right-hand side of the colon, you have the academic and a clear message of which approach. Right? And she writes, a feminist approach to the effects of poverty on the female population of Mango Street. So you know exactly what approach the essay is taking. This first paragraph gives a little bit of background info on the theory. Let's read through some of it. According to the United Nations, over 1 billion people, the majority of whom are women, live in impoverished conditions. These conditions are often heightened by the implications of patriarchal societies that promote neglect towards the treatment of women by undervaluing their opinions and role in society. In 1848, after many years of oppression, the feminist movement was created with the means of advocating and establishing women's rights along with gender equality. Although this social movement took off in the 19th century, it wasn't until the 1920s that the suffrage movement in fact gained momentum. From that moment on, women began to revolt male-enforced subjugation. To this day, the fight continues as patriarchal societies still undermine female empowerment. All right, now notice she's going to transition to the novel. The novel, The House on Mango Street, and just a quick aside, notice that the title of the book, the novel, is in italics. Short stories are in quotes. Titles of big works like books, novels, they are italicized. So the novel, The House on Mango Street, addresses the continued problematic effect that the feminist movement faces. All right, now here's some background about the novel. Author Sandra Cisneros portrays herself in the role of Esperanza, a young Latina who is faced with growing up in a poverty-stricken community and who must confront all the negative ramifications that come along with living in a misogynist society. All right, now this is what she's giving her, this is her claim, her thesis statement. And notice how it does kind of connect to the title. In the novel, Esperanza also narrates the stories of multiple women in her community from which she draws inspiration to break society's already established notions of gender roles. So I like how this connects back to the creative part, liberating Mango, right? So who's exactly being liberated here? Well, according to the author of this essay, it's Esperanza, right? And we know that she's our first person narrator. So she's telling the stories of these women in her community from which she draws inspiration. So if you watch the video on when I went through the prompt, the paper topics, right? That was, you could actually say that she kind of combined several of those prompts, right, where she's going to analyze different characters and explain how they kind of helped propel Esperanza to this quote-unquote freedom from a patriarchal society. All right, so that's the first paragraph. Now this, right, so we got the background info, we got the connection to the novel, and then that thesis. Now, notice there's going to be a quick pause, right? So we're going to have a little bit of history of how feminism can be problematic, right? And you'll also notice here that there's some background of how the critics, right, the critics who have written about feminism, not necessarily in relation to this book, but feminist critics in general, and about how they there's this conflict going on between them. So let's read through some of this. The feminist theory arose from the desire of exposing misogynistic attitudes in literature as a form of bringing awareness to society. With her book, Cisneros reopened the window of conversation that allowed readers to explore the feminist approach in an interpersonal manner. Since the audience can easily internalize the struggles that derive from socio-economic hardships, a sense of wanting to bring justice to women of Mango Street is hence generated. With that being said, now here's the background information about the critics. Some critics place most of their attention in highlighting how poverty is one of the major triggers for which many women submit to the authority of men and accept to fulfill imposed gender roles. Conflictingly, so this is the other side of the argument, others choose to instead see the effects of poverty as a trigger that empowers women to break the mold that is established for them. All right, so the conflict here is some critics suggest that are talking about how poverty kind of triggers women to submit to the authority of men, while others say that poverty is the trigger that empowers women to break the mold. So both have a different kind of interpretation of how poverty relates to gender roles here. Okay, so now we're going to get back to the novel with this sentence. Looking through a feminist lens which is aimed at understanding the nature of gender inequality and the examination of socio-economic roles, one is able to break down the effects that poverty has on the livelihood of women that reside on Mango Street. Okay, so what she's done here, she's kind of given us a background, which was part of that, if you looked at the outline, kind of like, what have critics said about this? So what Maritza has done here is kind of basically let us know that there's this discussion going on, or in this case, maybe a conflict between just how critics view poverty, right, and its relationship to feminism. All right? So now she's going to go into that, and she's going to start talking about a character, Maureen. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Throughout the novel, poverty is the central element that decides the fate of the women that live in the neighborhood. Okay, so there's a bold claim, a bold topic sentence there. This central element enables women to develop aspirations of ascending in society. Okay, so poverty is responsible, right, for how women are going to try to basically climb the ladder in society. But it also denotes the means through which they attempt to remedy the problem. All right, now she's going to go into a really important character, Maureen. For instance, Maureen serves as the perfect example of a young woman that has the strong will of one day achieving economic stability, but her approach is the same as the one that binds many women to abusive and controlling relationships. So what Maritza is telling us here is that Maureen would kind of would back up to this critics, right? Some critics place most of their attention in highlighting how poverty is one of the major triggers for which many women submit. So that's what she's saying that Maureen is doing here, all right? And now, but what does all that mean, right? You got to give a quote from the novel, and that's what she's going to do now. In the vignette, Maureen Esperanza recounts the events of a conversation she had with her. Maureen says that if she stays here next year, she's going to get a real job downtown because that's where, that's where the best jobs are, since you always get to look beautiful and get to wear nice clothes and can meet someone in the subway who might marry you and take you to live in a big house far away. Notice the block quote, right? The block quote, usually it's lines, if it's 4, so we got 1, 2, 3. If it's 4 lines or longer, you got to block it, and you set that up with a colon, and everything is indented. Notice there's no quotation marks. Okay? So we got this part about Maureen. Now notice the analysis, right? The analysis here of how Maureen is affected by poverty, right? So you got this background of poverty. You got a specific example from the novel, in this case Maureen, and you have here Maritza's analysis of that quote. And notice, right, it comes right after. Maureen's mindset is the same as the one of a woman who has accepted the norms established in patriarchal societies. So, okay, so that really harkens back to that conflict that those critics had. Some critics say poverty forces women to be subjugated by men. Others say it's an example that helps women get out. But here Maureen falls into the former. Okay, so Marine's mindset is the same as the one of a woman who has accepted the norms established in patriarchal societies. In order to fulfill her goal of ascending the socio-economic pyramid, remember climbing the ladder, she is willing to satisfy the expected role of a woman and submit to the will of a man, right? By looking pretty, looking a certain way, using her sexuality to attract, right? To get out of her predicament. By doing so, Marine is objectifying herself and putting her societal needs above her rights as a woman. Mindsets like those of Marine is what landed women a subordinate classification in many communities of the Western world. All right. Okay. So here, what you're going to notice now is the writer, Maritza, is going to use another outside source that's unrelated to the novel. All right. It has nothing to do with the house on Mango Street, but it has something to do with feminism to help explain Marine's situation. All right. Before the feminist literary movement was created in 1968, women accepted the misconstrued allegations created by men that marked off women as unintelligent, dependent, and needy. Such thoughts were so drilled into the female mindset that they were carried over through generations into modern times. Marine herself is a victim of the fabricated lies that have bound women to depend on men for financial stability. Today, critics of the feminist ideologies have even labeled women as being the very enemy of their own social movement. In the academic article, okay, so this is the introduction of the article that's not related to the house on Mango Street. In the academic article, New Feminism's War on Women, author Brendan O'Neill states, "It is from these people that you most often hear the argument that the new feminism is a war on men, a war on boys, a war on blokish everyday life. I think it's wrong to see the new feminism in this way because, if anything, the new feminism is a war on women. It explicitly calls into question the ability of women to negotiate public life without the assistance of others. It calls into question not so much male privilege as female autonomy and female capacity." So again, this kind of falls in line with that first critic that she talks about. All right. So this particular critic thinks that feminism, right, actually posits the idea that women lack the capacity, that they lack the ability to be self-sufficient. Okay, and I'll wrap this video up by pointing out in this, right, so this is the interpretation, this is the analysis of this long quote that needs to be unpacked. O'Neill's views on new feminism denote that women have been so conditioned by misogynist ideologies that they, women, truly believe that special accommodations are needed in order for them to confront the harsh environments created by men. Without realizing it, women are still depending on men to make their life less complicated, when in fact the feminist movement should prepare them to confront struggles through their own means. In the novel, Marine relied on the thought that a man would solve her financial issues, and that immediately turned her into an enemy of the feminist cause. So I really want to point out something here, right? This was a string of maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs that developed a single point. When students freak out about, oh my God, how do I do a 6-page paper, right? You got to get out of that 5-paragraph mindset. You can still have 2 or 3 points. I would argue that in this paper, there's probably only 2 or 3 points, but the points are expanded, right? One point could take, 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs, and that's what Maritza did here. Okay, so yeah, so basically, this kind of takes care of that first part of the critic. Right? Remember, we talked about the conflict that poverty kind of forces women to act a certain way. So in the next video, we'll talk about the flip side, as the writer here, Maritza, kind of transitions from Marine to more of the positive influences on Esperanza.